Greek was not completely lost with the Western Church, but the documentation of the Greek scriptures were long lost by the 15th century. What scholars did have access to were in complete disarray, a bunch of manuscripts just disorganized. A Dutch monk by the name of Erasmus similarly became obsessed with recovering the ancient Greek text of the New Testament for the Western Church, the way that Jerome had become obsessed with translating from the original text into Latin nearly a millennia before. Erasmus was a part of the very beginning of a movement called the Humanist movement. In the earliest days of this movement, it was really spearheaded by Christian theologians, and it emphasized a return to the roots of things in order to uncover their original meanings. Erasmus successfully pulled together an authoritative version of the original Greek texts. In comparison with the modern-day Greek New Testament, informed by tremendous amounts of archaeological finds and years of study of the manuscript evidence, Erasmus was a little bit off in his Greek text. Though we know more now and constructed even more accurate texts, Erasmus' texts were really a spark, lighting a fire and understanding its meaning from the original languages over the years of Latin translation and tradition. In studying the Greek text that Erasmus used to construct his manuscript, he began to notice that many of the Latin translations of verses were inaccurate. Some of these inaccuracies struck to the roots of cornerstone theological concepts held in the Western Church. As Erasmus completed his work, he had struck a blow to Rome's authority over the text that he himself didn't even fully understand or intend. His own questions aside, Erasmus stayed a faithful adherent to the Roman Church despite the implications of his work. Late in Erasmus's life and ministry, a young German monk named Martin Luther came across his writings and his Greek New Testament. Luther was disillusioned with many of the practices of the Roman Church, and he was looking for answers. In Erasmus, he found compelling evidence that his own disillusionments had actual merit. Luther studied Greek and began his own reformation of the theology of the church, based partly on his study of Erasmus's Greek New Testament. Rome rejected the challenges of Luther, but the political situation was just right in the province that Luther lived in, so his Reformation took hold and changed the Western Church forever from there till now. Prior to this time, other translations of the scriptures into more common languages around Europe had been attempted, but all of them used the Latin Vulgate text as a base, and none of them were gaining real traction or approval from Rome. In a bit of unpredictable natural outworkings of the returning to the original languages was an opening of the biblical texts for new translations. After all, if the official text of the church had been an imperfect translation all these years, and Latin had become as foreign to most of the readers of that day as the original Greek and Hebrew text, then why not translate the original text into the everyday language of those who were going to church? So Luther then created a German translation of the Bible. By this time, Gutenberg had already invented the printing press so that Luther could print copies easily and then have them disseminated through the entire region very quickly. Luther's adherents could now read the Bible for themselves, and they could use their own reasoning and study to determine if what they were hearing from church leadership was accurate or inaccurate. This both was a blessing to the church and a curse. As folks read their Bibles for themselves, it sparked a revolution of understanding the faith as a personal thing and not just a tribal one. Folks saw themselves as having access to God both in connection to the church or on their own. Ultimately, this kind of flattening the study of the scriptures led to the years of critical work that has been done to those texts till today. I'm able to put together this series and not be executed for it because Luther rediscovered the original Greek text of Erasmus. At the same time, what was once a unified church with boundaries for those within to play every disagreement now seems to lead to a further split of the church.